Own Your Truth with life strategist Laura T. Real advice for regular people. Now, here's Laura.
Hello, and welcome to Own Your Truth, where we're talking real advice for regular people. I'm Laura T. Thank you so much for listening. Each month, I have been lucky enough to be interviewing fabulous people living life their way. And this week is no exception. I am excited and really honored to be interviewing this fabulous woman tonight. Jessica Pels is the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan, the largest young women's media brand in the world, where she oversees the content and editorial operations for the magazine, the web, video, and editorial innovation projects. Prior to her current role, Jessica served as the digital director of Cosmopolitan, where she led the site to its highest readership of all time. She also served as the digital director at Marie Claire. Before then, she worked in print as the features editor at Teen Vogue and held various editorial positions at Glamour. Jessica is a graduate of New York University, where she earned a BFA in film production from Tisch School of Arts. She hails from Atlanta and now lives in Manhattan. Jessica, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Hi, I'm so happy to talk to you.
How are you?
I'm good. It's a strange time. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. I hear you're in Atlanta.
I am from Atlanta, yes.
Oh, okay.
I still have my Atlanta phone number, which throws a lot of people. But
okay.
I am here in Hell's Kitchen, alone in Manhattan.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know, holding down the fort.
Well, I'm sure given how you work, although you may be alone physically, you are definitely not alone in terms of contact.
Oh, God, no. Yes. It's constant communication. At the end of my workday every day, I feel like I was interacting with more people than even I usually do. So, yes, it's a lot of people, and we're keeping an eye on each other. And, I think in this particular moment, having digital connectivity the way that we do is so critical. And it's been really inspiring to watch my staff of young women check on each other and have Zoom cocktail hours and make sure that everyone feels like they're still a part of a family.
Well, I'm sure much of that is inspired by you and how you show up. I know you, and I know your generosity and just kindness. So I'm sure so much of that connectivity is inspired by you.
Oh, that's sweet.
Oh. All right. So are you ready to dive in tonight?
I am.
Okay. So, I'm absolutely fascinated by the work that you do. And so I have a few questions to start off the show about your work. But before we go there, I wanted to touch on your love of storytelling. It's something that I heard you talk a lot in other interviews, and it seemed like a common thread in your career. And, in looking at your own life, it's such a great story. You have this fascinating background, an amazing resume, and this very cool job. If you could caption your personal story, what would it read?
Ooh, the ultimate challenge of tightness for an editor. I think about a decade ago, I would have wanted the thrust of my personal story to be about command over my craft, mastery of my craft. And then I think about 5 years ago, I would have wanted it to be about ingenuity, innovation, being pioneering in this industry. And I think now, I guess what I'm saying is that it's evolved. Now I think I want my story to be just as much about heart, about passion for the work and the people who make it, but also, this may sound cheesy, but a focus on love and on enriching the lives of my loved ones. And I guess on leading as much with my heart as my head.
Wow, that's beautiful. Can you explain sort of the evolution, what's caused it to come about?
I think I have always been a very driven person ever since I was a child. My parents tell me that I used to walk around and I was very busy, even as a toddler, too busy for them to hug me because I had things to do. And so I think I've always been focused on achievement. And I'm lucky enough in my career to have gotten to a place where I have achieved a lot. I'm certainly not done, but I've achieved enough that I feel like I can stand on this mountaintop and look at what my life is and where I think it could grow still. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So when you look back, and, even looking back at this evolution you just described, what do you want your story to say about you ultimately?
Oh, that's such a lovely, profound question. That I cared, that I showed fully up at every opportunity. I am someone who, when I believe in something, I give it my absolute all. I give it 110%. And I think when things work, it's because of that. It's because I really fully show up. And I think that's what I would like my story to say.
Oh, and I'm sure it will. Again, just knowing you the little bit that I do. So let's talk Cosmopolitan. Keeping in the theme of storytelling, Cosmopolitan has so many storytelling platforms. There's print, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, that's just a couple of them. As editor-in-chief, what is one piece of advice you would give someone managing their message across multiple platforms?
I think any business, and really all businesses, are managing their brand across multiple platforms at this point. And they should be. And I think the trick is focusing on content and on voice that are endemic to each space. So, a thought-provoking essay about workflow might do well for your LinkedIn followers, but would bomb for your Instagram audience.
Right.
And I think you have to really think about each platform as entirely separate audiences looking for entirely separate things. And your challenge is to make sure that everything you message out across those various platforms is still authentic to you, either as a brand or as a person or a creator.
Do you find that it's easy to lose that across platforms, that sense of you?
I think I have seen brands try too hard to, when they're adapting TikTok to be really weird. And the youngs call it try hard when a brand sort of abandons its core DNA in an effort to win over a new audience. I have seen it happen. I think for me, what it really comes back to is voice, is authenticity of voice. So the presentation of Cosmo may be and is vastly different across Twitter or TikTok, but we're using the same voice. We may be using leveraging slightly different sides of our vocabulary depending on the platform. But if the voice, if the spirit of the thing is consistent, I think that's when it really works.
Awesome. Great advice. So looking at Cosmopolitan, I heard you say once you described it as being vintage cool, which I thought was totally awesome. What does it take to keep a magazine vintage cool and relevant for today's readers? Again, looking at all of the platforms that you cover.
Right. It's a tricky balance. The first issue of Cosmo, as we know it today, was published in 1965. And obviously a lot has changed since then, which in the case of women's empowerment, Cosmo played a large part in that, which is very cool. But there are things that haven't changed. And for Cosmo in particular, the plucky confidence, the shameless ownership of what you want, a sassy sense of humor, those things were there then and are central to us now. And I'm so glad to be at the helm of a brand with this at the core of its DNA, because that whole spirit, that whole joie de vivre is more timely and relevant to young women today than ever before. So my job, I think, is really to focus on celebrating the parts of our DNA that were relevant then and are relevant now, while at the same time, it can be a dangerous game, but you have to be brave about breaking what doesn't work anymore. And being bold about moving forward. Wow.
Great advice. Given the extent of your experiences, I was really curious about the lessons that you've learned along the way. So the first question I have is about priorities. I mean, you've got so much to juggle just at work, never mind all the things that you juggle at home. How do you set your priorities?
This is a constant struggle, and I think it will be. But
good, you're human. It's nice to know you're human.
Yes, very, very human. I think one of the skills I've developed later in my career, as my jobs have expanded, is just a constant reassessment of priority on practically like a minute-to-minute basis. What I thought was the most important thing this morning might be 12 degrees less important by the afternoon when something else comes up. And I think that requires more emotional nimbleness than we necessarily acknowledge as a culture. Mm-hmm. The ability to sort of attach yourself to something and drive at it, and then be able to put it on the back burner and reattach yourself to something else immediately. And especially recently, I've as a human, I have, put more focus on building walls around the time in which I want to choose not to work and to focus on, nourishing my brain or my body, self-care, building routines around things that I find recharge me. So that's sort of how I balance it professionally and personally.
So can you share one simple tip you have about sort of setting up that walls? I know with the number of people that I coach, both men and women, that setting up the wall where it's your time. Can you share one tip you use to set that time for yourself?
Yeah, I think a sort of timely thing, actually, this has really popped up in the time of Corona, is I have a staff of mostly young women. We're all in our 20s and early 30s, basically. And I realized early on in this self-isolation, social distancing time that it's very easy for people without children to look up from the laptop at 10 p.m. and realize that they haven't moved or, felt a distinctive difference between the working day and the not working day. Right. So my leadership team and I established a new rule for our team. We're calling them Slack and email hours. For us, we're saying that they're from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And basically, that's a structure for the entire team that when we communicate about work, it's during those times. We can draft things, schedule things if we're working after hours, but that ideally we're kind of limiting our work discussion to those hours so that we feel, all of us collectively, a distinctive, okay, now we're moving into after hours where we can focus on ourselves. And especially now with the need to focus on mental health and on distancing yourself from the constant news cycle. That's been really helpful. I really feel very accountable to my team at all times. I feel in some ways like I work for them. And if they're asking me questions at night, I will answer them at night. And so this has sort of been a collective, like we're all going to do this together. And I am notoriously bad about sending after hours ideas and questions as things come up. So we're all doing it together. And that's been really, really helpful.
What a great message to start from the top and share with your team members. That's outstanding.
Thank you.
So in a lot of the interviews that I'd heard you do with other people, you talked about your struggle with perfectionism. How has, and again, this is something I talk with a lot of people about, how has being a perfectionist served you? Because I know for a long period of time it really does serve people. And then I would ask after, how has it challenged you?
Being a perfectionist has made me attentive to detail in a way that I think is critical in my line of work in particular. And in this day and age, when we're sprinting across a million projects and platforms at once, it's helpful to be able to get the details right and move fast at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think it's been really useful in that way. It's been a challenge in that I'm still working on this very much too. It's been a challenge figuring out when to let go, what's worth holding back to perfect, and what's better to release as soon as possible. I think those of us who work on the internet and in social media and in video have to learn that lesson in a bit more of a rolling, you just have to keep moving kind of way. And so that, constantly assessing ROI and what's worth finessing and what it won't really make a difference if I spend an extra hour doing X, Y, or Z. And then, of course, not being too hard on myself is a perpetual challenge. I'm my own worst critic by far, and that springs from the perfectionism. And I was talking to a friend of mine I'm a Virgo. He's a Leo, and we were talking about the fact that for Leos, the ultimate is compliments about being awesome. And for Virgos, I realized that for Virgos, the ultimate compliment is having done something perfectly, having done something awesomely. And so I sort of live my life by this metric of have I performed to the ultimate perfection, which, of course, no one can. And to be honest, no one should. And so the more I'm able to shake myself free of that, the better off I am.
And so, of course, I have to ask, how do you even define perfect? Because this is, again, when I talk to people about this, how do you define perfect for you?
Oh, right. Well, it seems to be perpetually out of reach, which I suppose is the point and the problem, right? If I have done something, then it can't be perfect because perfect is the unachievable. Which, wow, what a sick cycle of self-torture that is.
Admittance is the first step to recovery.
Thank you, yes.
It's so true. And until you have that definition, at least even for that moment, that project, I think you're right. It is hard to find that satisfaction with a job well done.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I suppose I also associate satisfaction with a job well done with resting on one's laurels, which I've always thought was dangerous. And as soon as you get complacent, the work suffers. And so my perpetual need to push forward, I think it's all wrapped up in the same somewhat scary bundle.
Well, it is working for you, I have to say. No, I don't know that it's healthy, but it is definitely working for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So another question that I had is, you had talked about in other interviews floating in on borrowed confidence and having that feeling of imposter syndrome, at least at the start of your career. What do you think it takes to make that switch from borrowed confidence to truly feeling confident in what you're doing?
I think it's about building up things that work. So I think every success, every project that goes well, every risk that pays off, I sort of visualize it like those are little cards that you put in your confidence pile. And so your confidence pile over time gets bigger and bigger. There will, and I really think should always also be cards in your humility pile. I think the two have to exist in a certain kind of balance. But that once the confidence cards outnumber the humility cards, you start to feel like it's not borrowed, it's earned. And I think that really fuels future confidence too. I know I can do this scary thing I've never done before because I did that other scary thing I've never done before, and that worked. So I think the real benefit too is that that's what allows you to take real risks and to feel like you have safe harbor for the ones that don't work out. I think anyone who's not trying things that don't work is resting on laurels and isn't, pushing for growth. And I think part of it in a corporate system like mine is that, having more cards in the confidence pile means I have a lot of support from my superiors who have celebrated wins with us and trust me that if something doesn't work, I will evolve and adapt.
Awesome. So does that relate back to the quote that I've heard you say, if you aren't in over your head, how do you know how tall you are? I love that quote.
Yes, I do too.
And I don't know if you came up with it. I'm like, that's a brilliant quote. And
God, no, I wish. I think it's T.S. Eliot.
Oh, that's right. I think you had mentioned that. It's a brilliant quote. And I attribute it to you, so look at that.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm kidding. Is that idea that part of it is pushing yourself, not sort of resting on your laurels? Does that incorporate at all with that quote?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think it's associated, too, with the fact that I do really have to feel like I've given something my all. There's this piece of me that believes that, like, 10% of any project, any work initiative, any personal anything, 10% of the things that work out is due to the fact that I just pushed my heart into it and just really believed and got everyone else excited. And I personally don't think I can do that unless I have thrown everything in. And I'm the kind of person who, when I take a ballet class or a tennis lesson, if I'm not like drenched in sweat and so sore that I can barely walk, I feel like I didn't give it enough, but that I also didn't get enough out of it. So I really do like to give everything my all. And that's sort of what that quote says to me. It also speaks to a lack of fear, a lack of fear that holds you back, at least. I think there's a certain cautiousness that we all have to have, an awareness of what the risks are and what we stand to lose if things don't work out. I'm constantly running analyses on what that landscape looks like, but being smart about, okay, I can withstand that loss. And so I will take this risk. And fearlessness, I think, is so important in this day and age, and especially when you work for the audience I work for, which is young women who are themselves very fearless and have incredibly high expectations of leaders, of political leaders, of business leaders, of influencers. They just have immense expectation, as they should, and so. I rambled and
no, not at all.
Your question.
No, I mean, as I'm listening to you, I'm just absorbed in your answer and thinking, like, you're just such a great role model. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and just what you stand for and how you think about things, just really a great role model for young women, which makes you obviously the perfect role that you're in right now. And so with that, we'll take our next break, which, as our regular listeners know, it's time for the Own Your Truth Musical Artist of the Week. This week, I'm thrilled to feature, once again, Lee Silvestri. My regular listeners know Lee. He's one of my favorite local musicians. Not only is he super talented, he's an outstanding person, and I'm honored to call him a friend. Last week, he released his new song, Crescent Moon. It's a story we can all relate to about love found and lost. Take a listen. Lee Silvestri, Crescent Moon.
Our very first dance was a delicate one. Words were our foils and we chased the sun. Lofty ideas, yeah, unloaded guns, and hardly a hint of the heat yet to come. Oh, for a time there was peace in the valley, love in the wood and fire in the sky. Sleep had no value, love kept no tally. What should have been framework was riddled with lie. Oh, it happened so soon, the waxing and waning of my crescent moon. Oh, it's midnight at noon, for spiders and camels, my heart and my room. Tight grip on the wheel, it was our navigator. The best of the planners trying hard to be whole. Came bitter the wind, yeah, and hungry the gators. Got tossed on the waves and started to roll. When love ran aground and my strength had left me, was was my turn to feign love I barely could stand. When you needed patience, when you needed kindness, when it was too tall in order for a shriveling man. Oh, it happened so soon, the waxing and waning of my crescent moon. Oh, like snowfall in June, memory of laughter, your voice in a tune. Now I won't shed a tear for the good love we tasted, for the thrill of my life, or for hard lessons learned. And you have your say, love, but I won't call them wasted. The years that we shared, or the bridges we burned. And oh, it happened so soon, the waxing and waning of my crescent moon. Oh, it's midnight at noon, here I am calling some old red-eyed loon. I wonder at thunder smiling in the gloom. My thoughts are out waltzing with my crescent moon.
Welcome back from the soothing sounds of Lee Silvestri. You know, since starting the show, I've been blessed to be connected to musicians around the state. While there are so many people who could use our support these days, please don't forget to support our local talent. While they aren't able to play live in venues, many are playing free online. If you hear something you enjoy, make a comment, press like, and spend the money to buy their music. It's the least we can do to help them while they help us get through these changing times. Okay, back to the show. For those of you just joining us tonight, I'm spending time with Jessica Pels, the editor-in-chief of Cosmopolitan. Before the break, we talked about lessons Jessica's learned along the way. Now I thought we'd jump into a little bit about data and technology because, Jessica, I understand, like, the data is big for you.
Yes, immensely big.
And so when you're looking at the numbers, and, you know, I have to say I pulled up some stats because I had to brag on your behalf a little bit. I read you reach 81 million people, and subscriptions to Cosmopolitan nearly doubled when you started. I have to say that our growth is because we listen to the audience as obsessively as we do, and data is how we do that. My news director, Alexandra Whitaker, is such a smarty, and she was giving a seminar last week, and she said this thing I loved so much that I wrote it down, which is that data is breadcrumbs about what your audience thinks and feels. She said it's a hint, it's a gift, and I just adore that because it's, you know, I think when we say the word data, when we talk about data points and metrics like traffic, it can seem so deeply unsexy. But really what we're talking about is interest, is how passionate the audience is about this thing or how little interest they have in this other thing. And so the fact that we are so attentive and so attuned to what the audience wants is why we've been able to grow and recruit new audience as we go. Well, that's what I found so amazing about how you respond to the audience. You know, I had seen your interviews with the presidential candidates, and that was your answer to questions women had about the upcoming elections. And so when you're looking at the data, what is the story that you're looking for? How do you pull out that great information and apply it the way that you do?
Well, so I think in regards to this question, there's sort of two types of data that I'm looking at. The first is responsive feedback about what we're publishing. So performance metrics, view numbers or engaged time or how many shares we get on a story. So that kind of feedback about what we're publishing is really one of the key guiding principles of what we do next. We drop what doesn't work. We lean really hard into what does. But then there's another kind of data that we have been focused really hard at Cosmo on developing more rapidly, which is polling data. And we get that from our audience every day. And that enables us to ask really timely questions and get really timely feedback that is directional about, Cosmo readers are largely millennial women, increasingly Gen Z women as well. And so we get really good directional information about what those generations care about and what they don't. And I think in regards to the candidates that you mentioned, the Candidates Come to Cosmo interview series that we did, a point of frustration for myself and my staff is that millennials were rarely, if ever, addressed directly by presidential candidates. Despite the fact that they represent over a third of voters and half of the total population and have very legitimate, perhaps surprisingly legitimate and practical concerns. I know from this polling data this proprietary data that we get from our audience, that reliable access to affordable health care has consistently been the number one concern of Cosmo readers for this entire election cycle. So I saw those interviews as an opportunity to sort of solve two problems at once. To educate the candidates about what matters to millennials and why, right, in the hopes that the candidates then develop policies that speak to those concerns. And to give millennials direct access to candidates speaking to their concerns in a forum they find helpful. That polling data I talked about has informed us that most millennials do not find the debates to be a helpful format for decision-making when it comes to who they want to support. So this was our solve for all of those things at once.
It was outstanding. And any of the listeners who haven't seen it, it's just a great place to go for really pertinent information. So as you're looking at the data today, what do you see as the next big thing for Cosmopolitan?
Well, I have so many irons in the fire, my whole team, and I am so proud and lucky to work with this group of young women who are just so hungry and brilliant and ambitious and creative. And we have way too many ideas and way too little time to do them. So we have some things that Christina, my PR person, would kill me if I told you. Okay. So I won't tell you yet. But, okay. But, speaking to broader industry trends, video, of course, is the big frontier for all media companies. And my boss said something really smart to me once about, for magazine brands, what the real challenge is there. And the challenge is that as magazine makers, as content creators for websites and social platforms, we're really good at service. We're really good at surprise. We're really good at journalism. Video calls for a different skill, and that skill is entertainment, which is just sort of a different thing, having fun and making people laugh. And that can be a challenging thing to learn. So I think that's the hurdle for a lot of media brands who are jumping into video. I think, I'm curious to see what happens with the smart speaker and the voice control market. I think we're at the very beginning of the trajectory of what could happen there. It's really exciting to me. I think discovery is the big hurdle we all have to jump, how people find you, how people find what's there. I don't know that there needs to be a product-based solve for that there isn't yet. So I'm curious to see what happens there. I do see if content consumption is sort of a chain, I see that streaming video, people watching streaming services like Netflix and Hulu, they're asking questions about that content as they're watching it. And the way they ask those questions is Googling and landing on sites like mine to get answers. So we are part of the same chain. I actually see a link between those two things that hasn't been created yet, or at least not fully. My team and I have developed a thing that we call Watch Party that is basically a sort of connective tool so that we're bringing you content about the show you're watching without you having to look for it. And so that, I think, has a lot of potential and could be a really large content arena for creators going forward. And then, of course, right now, the big thing is TikTok.
Of course. Having teenagers,
your
of course.
Yes. I'm sure she's on TikTok.
Well, I'm a little bit tighter. I'm sure she's home shaking her head. No, actually, I'm not, because I'm a little bit tighter on the use of social media. But at the same time, her cousins have it. She is well aware of it. She does dances in our kitchen and all those sorts of fun things. Both her and my son do.
Yes.
So,
learning a TikTok dance, not a bad way to spend your quarantine time.
Not at all. It's actually, even for the parents, it's extremely entertaining. So as you talk about that idea of video and it being entertainment, and I had read a statistic that the average Cosmopolitan reader checks her Instagram 47 times a day. I wondered, how do media outlets balance the need to provide that constant update and that entertainment with the need to provide accurate, quality information to its readers?
I don't really think the two things are mutually exclusive, ever, really. And I kind of feel like my focus for us is always on impact. And we talk about this a lot, especially with my features team, with my op-ed team. If you write what you believe is a worthy story, but only 10 people read it, it didn't have enough impact. It didn't help the people who needed it because it didn't get to them.
Right.
So what I push for is always the fresh and fascinating angle that makes you want to opt in. I think in digital in particular, editors learn this really critical lesson very early on, which is that, in print, you have a captive audience. Someone purchased your product or got sent your product, and they're there for what's inside the covers, and they don't necessarily have a choice. They flip the pages, maybe they read them, maybe they don't, but it's all bundled together. The thing about digital, of course, is that the content is disseminated across multiple platforms. You, a user of the internet, you are choosing everything you click on to engage with, right? It's either in your Twitter feed or it's a search result on Google. And so what that means is that the onus is really on the content creator to make it interesting enough for you to want to read. My team and I talk a lot about reproductive rights, which are a very important thing and a very high political priority for our audience. But, they're talked about a lot and they can seem sort of dry.
Right.
And so I'm always pushing for, make this interesting, make this really juicy and fascinating. And that is possible. I think we've gotten very used to serious content being treated seriously in a way that makes it feel less vibrant than, a Kim Kardashian story. And I think that's the problem.
Right.
So it's sort of about bringing those two things together and creating a sense of urgency where you need it most.
That's such a good point about those two pieces, accuracy and entertainment not being mutually exclusive. And I think that people learning to do that can really look at Cosmo as a model to follow as an organization who is doing that successfully. So thank you for that. Oh, we'll talk a little bit about mastery because, as a coach, I love to work with people to close the gap from where they are now to where they want to be. And a lot of people see that as this place of mastery. So what do you think it takes to master your craft?
I think it takes a brutal honesty that you never should feel like you have. I think it's probably clear from our past discussions that I do feel like as soon as you assume that there's not someone right behind you, that's when you get overtaken. And the beauty of media and of my industry is that it is constantly evolving. And the particular beauty of a young audience is that they're always ahead of the curve. You know this from having teenagers. They are always ahead of the curve. They're always
guessing
than you think they are. I know. And so they really keep us on our toes. And, I do think as a grammarian and a perfectionist, I do think there is a mastery of the craft of, feature writing and the craft of headline writing that you should feel like you solidly have those tools in your toolkit. But once you feel like I've got this about every piece of your work, I think that's when it's time to grow forward and move on.
And so do you feel like you've gotten to the point where you've mastered your craft, and whether it's been in those smaller, sub-segments of what you do, but are there places that you feel like you've mastered your craft?
I get a great satisfaction from editing. It's such a luxury to me, honestly, to sit and edit a story, to line edit and mark it up. And I find that such a true pleasure. And that's something I do feel like I do well. I am unfortunately not able to spend most of my time doing that, but it's a pleasure to do it when I can. And I think finding those things about your work that feel fundamental and therefore feel nourishing because you do them well, that's really important to keep you powered up and to enable you to feel strong enough to look out into the great beyond and create new obstacles and challenges for yourself. I do feel like the beauty of Cosmo is that it's the world's biggest media sandbox. We've got, every platform. We've got a huge team of ambitious creatives. And so anything we want to do, we can. I also have incredible support from my bosses who have always told me over the years. I've worked with my current bosses for about 5 years now. They've always told me to dream bigger and to go for it and to sometimes even ask forgiveness, not permission. So if there's something that we want to do that doesn't exist yet, we create it. And I think that means that it's very hard to get bored.
What a great environment to grow your career in when you have that type of support around you.
Absolutely.
So when you think about your time at Cosmo, what do you want your legacy to be?
I struggle with how to frame this, actually, because I really do want to feel like I left a legacy of putting the audience first over myself, over the brand. It's the audience that matters. I say this all the time, that I am not the boss of the brand. The reader is the boss of the brand. And I think, it does take humility, and it takes a lack of hubris and a lack of ego to step aside and let the star be your audience. But I hope that is what I have done and continue to do. And I think at the same time, the trick is to keep surprising the audience, to keep them on their toes as much as they keep me on mine.
Awesome. Wow. So if you could give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Oh, man, chill out. I don't know that I would necessarily change anything because it got me where I am, and I'm so grateful to be here. But I was a very stressed out high school student. I took a full load of AP classes for, 3 years in high school, and an aggressive ballet schedule. And I was talking to a friend the other day who said he had so much fun in high school he couldn't believe it. And I was like, I had no fun in high school. And I wish that I had relaxed a little bit. I'm not sure where I could have found some slack for myself, but I do think it's important to develop a sense of what does recharge you, and to understand that going all the time can be unhealthy and can limit you. So I've had to learn that later. But I suppose that's what I would say to young Jessica Duncan.
And so what are some of the things that Jessica does for fun? I mean, what do you do? How do you sort of break out of your work mold? Yes.
Right. So I have started to learn how to cook, which I really find so fun and satisfying. And I was sort of scared of it because I am a good baker, but I've never really tackled cooking before. And so now is the perfect time to to do that, and it's been really fun. So I cook. Before we went on lockdown for this period of time, I was starting to learn tennis, and I just adore it.
Wow!
I'm quite frustrated because I had just gotten to the point where I was like, okay, and I feel like I'm going to have to start over. But I love tennis. I love dancing, and really just spending time with loved ones, going to get drinks, to get dinner, is probably my favorite pastime, which is a very New York City thing to say.
No, that's fantastic. So you mentioned dancing, and we didn't share, you mentioned it in our conversation, but we didn't share that you were planning to be a professional ballet dancer at one point.
I was hoping to be, yes.
Hoping to be. And so in sort of bringing your story full circle, could you talk a little bit about that experience and how did that help you, if at all, get to sort of your commitment and dedication to do the work?
Ballet is very challenging. I think everyone knows that at this point, thanks to all of the scary movies that have been made about it. Ballet is really hard, and it's not for the weak, and it's not for the timid. And I learned a lot of discipline from ballet. I learned a lot of stress management from ballet, the ability to, deal with pain in real time, to smile through it. I've had a number of injuries that I've had to perform through, and that takes a lot of internal strength, and that, of course, will serve anyone forever. So I think it's also an interesting confluence of storytelling, of aesthetics, which has served me in my magazine career. And performing for an audience. And one thing that I think is important in regards to that stage performers know well, but I don't know that other performers do, is that you have to sit in the audience and look at the stage and put yourself in a ticket holder's place. And that's the whole point of what you're doing, is for their sake, not for yours. And I think it's hard to literally and metaphorically go out there and sit down and see things from a new perspective. But that's the point of what we do. And I think that's, what I try to do myself and with my team at Cosmo every day, is to step back and think about, okay, what does this feel like as the reader? What does this feel like as the viewer? And I think that's been a really important lesson to take from ballet.
Well, Jessica, I want to thank you so much for sharing this new perspective with us, for sharing your time and your expertise. Please tell listeners how they can follow you and be part of the Cosmopolitan audience.
This has been so fun. I have so much respect for you, and it was really nice to spend the time together this evening. Instagram is my big platform. It's the one I care about most anyway for myself. My handle is Jessica_Pels, and then Cosmo can be followed on all platforms that exist at Cosmopolitan. And I encourage everyone to follow us there just to see how we adapt from place to place, which is fun to watch in real time.
Well, I appreciate so much spending time with you tonight. You are amazing. And as always, listeners, I love to hear your thoughts on tonight's program. Visit Own Your Truth with Laura T., our Facebook page, and give me your feedback. Don't forget, if you miss a live show or want to share episodes with friends, you can catch replays on the Own Your Truth with Laura T. podcast, now available on iTunes. Search the show, download episodes, and sign up to be notified of new content. This is Laura T. on Own Your Truth, wishing you a healthy and happy week. Hear you next Sunday. Good night.